Okay, so welcome everyone. I hope you're having a wonderful day so far. My name is Marcelo Bonato, and I'm one of the founders of Recoded. We are a non-profit organization with a mission to prepare talented youth in conflict-affected areas to enter the digital economy as software developers and tech entrepreneurs. Today, we're doing the first session of our 4 events on digital trends, shaping opportunities for youth in the Middle East. As we know, COVID-19 is reshaping many long-held assumptions about the way we live, work, and interact with the world around us. In these sessions, we will learn how a global business leader like Bloomberg is adapting to this new reality. What do these changes mean for young people across the Middle East? And what opportunities exist for organizations to minimize the digital inequality gap? We're able to do this speaker session because of a partnership between Recoded and Bloomberg. The panel will last for about an hour, and we'll have 3 panelists and the moderator. There's also no pleasure to introduce you to our moderator, Riyad Hamadi. Riyad is Bloomberg News Executive Director for the Middle East and North Africa, leading the company's expansion in some of the fastest growing economies in the world. He has also led Bloomberg's coverage in sub-Saharan Africa and built up Bloomberg News economic coverage in Western Europe. So Riyad, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Marcelo. I don't know, I think others also heard that technology isn't always perfect. Since we're having a technology panel. So first of all, thank you everybody for joining, especially those joining from Lebanon at this difficult time. So this panel where we're going to go over sort of the grand title, The Future of Work. I mean, it wasn't that long ago that the main question people were worried about when thinking about the future of work is the impact of automation and artificial intelligence. Would it destroy jobs, or you know, would it really be a big opportunity? Will it just change jobs? The difference, even before COVID, was the question was whether right now whether society, the economy, industry would adapt fast enough to a changing environment. In the past, jobs have changed through history. That's always been the case. COVID has, on top of that, seems to have supercharged that change. At least that's what we're going to partly discuss in this panel. Digitization is very much upon us, and companies that don't make that transition quickly will struggle and are struggling. Remote work is one of the big changes, and we have one of my colleagues from Bloomberg is in charge of that, so we're going to talk about that, how that's working. But it has allowed companies to stress that their ability to function while most of their staff are not in the workplace. For many, it seems to be working. Bloomberg, it seems to be working. So does that mean it's the end of the traditional work routine? Or at least for those companies that can work online digitally. At the same time, remote work could also give companies the chance to hire talent across a wider geographic area, which I think which is very interesting also in the Middle East, because the opportunities are quite limited in our region. I mean, for companies, it's also a chance to save on office space and supplies. So what does it mean for both companies and youth in the Middle East? Will job seekers be entering a market with hiring freezes, poor conditions, or will it open up to more remote opportunities to gain experience and find work? And what can be done about the education system in the region to help it prepare aspirants better? And how does a global leader like Bloomberg see these changes and adapt? So this session, I think Marcelo already indicated, is one element of the partnership with Bloomberg to help youth gain access to job opportunities in the digital economy and ultimately work towards a more inclusive economy. The digital inequality gap is continuing to widen locally and globally between those who have the means and opportunities mainly in developed markets to prepare themselves for future work and those who don't. So to avoid the economic disenfranchisement, you need a sense of hope, and you need opportunity to learn, grow, and work regardless of your social economic status, nationality, and gender. I've got a few data points. International Labour Organization says in high-income countries, 27% of workers could work remotely from home. So more than a quarter of the workforce could work remotely. At the same time, for example, in Turkey, you know, half of work activities in Turkey are susceptible to automation. So, you know, the idea of adapting skill sets is really crucial in countries, for example, like Turkey. You have youth unemployment. It's a well-reported thing. It stands at 31% across the MENA region. In some countries, it's even higher. And that includes a large segment of university graduates. And above all, the quality of education is patchy, to put it mildly. You have some good institutions, but in general, broadly, it's very inconsistent across the region. And MENA scores test takers average well below, you know, what they do in other countries. And low-paid working conditions are worsening. So to help me discuss these things, I'm proud to introduce Victoria Cerullo, who's the Chief Operating Officer of our Global Technology Services and Solutions, and who's currently working on the Return to Office Task Force. So she'll have great insight. I'm also interested in how that's working. We also have Min Kim, who's an investor at Bloomberg Beta, where she spends most of her time on machine intelligence tools for knowledge workers. She's worked across Bloomberg's businesses to develop and articulate medium to long-term strategies. And last but not least, we have from our partners, Recoded, Alexandra Clare, who's the co-founder and chief executive officer, and she drives strategy and partnerships. Alexandra's experience spans 10 years over various fields, including education, technology, and social impact and law. Let me get started with Min. You know, you look at, you take the future view, you know, you're looking at changes in the industry. So let me ask you, what are the main trends you see coming in the workplace as a result of the pandemic now?
Thanks, Riyadh. Thank you for your kind introduction as well. And nice to meet everyone here. This is an unusual kind of way to gather, but I appreciate everybody making the time. So like Riyadh said, I am an investor at Bloomberg Beta. We are a seed stage venture firm focused on the future of work. Seems topical for today. And so to your question about what are some of the main trends, I guess there's like three parts that I want to highlight, and it is a reflection of acceleration of technology versus it being like particularly new, in my opinion. And so you already mentioned the remote work piece, and I think that is something that will only continue. And in some ways, we're all in this large scale experiment together in the sense that the global economy has gone remote all at the same time. And I want to caveat that this is a privilege for those of us who can go remote and work digitally. Obviously, there are careers and jobs and specific tasks that, you know, we live in a physical world. But for those of us who can, I don't necessarily know if we'll all stay remote as we are today, because that is not always sustainable. But there's this idea of a hybrid workplace that I think will only increase. And that actually, I think, is a net benefit, because it gives both options to workers and also options for employers in terms of geographic footprint, access to talent. And that, I think, leads to my second point around like the demand for reskilling, which is, I think, a bigger trend. And for all of you listening, like Recoded is a great example of an organization committed to that. In some ways, the we've had like this huge democratization of access to information and education. But the problem with that is now there's like so much, right? Like you don't know where to go. And so the values come from organizations who've curated those, and that could be, you know, third-party organizations like a Recoded, or employers themselves. And I think Bloomberg in particular, that's been like a big core part of the company's identity as well. And so that kind of neatly lies to the third point, which is something interesting that I've observed, especially in Silicon Valley, which is where I'm from. Which is around like worker empowerment and like the and how individual and the freelancer economy, something like that. And for all of you who've like just graduated or have learned new skills, there's this whole world of opportunity that aren't tied, that where your careers are not tied to specific employers if you so choose. And I think that is also like a net positive trend, where you're seeing more people who want a portfolio of skills, and therefore they have a portfolio of activities they can do. It's not just you join a company and you do one job for the next like 5 to 10 years. It is maybe you take a job for 2 years and then learn something new, and you go from being a software developer to trying your hand at marketing. And in the meantime, also explore opportunities around like writing, because and so whether you're, I hate saying like technical skills, because I think all skills have some degree of technical proficiency, but whether you are like coding or not, I think there are going remote in some ways has forced both employers and employees to articulate like what are the actual jobs to be done and what skills are required to do that, and that those like breakdowns don't fall neatly under like a job title per se, and that allows you more freedom to actually explore different opportunities.
So Min, can you talk a bit more about the kind of skills that you mentioned? So what are the new skills? You said that on the, you know, maybe joining a company and sticking with it for a longer time may not be the requirement, but there must be sort of a new set of skill sets that are now required then.
Sure. Well, so is it new skills, or is it like a new way to look at existing ones? So for example, I think great writing and communication actually becomes even more important, especially in a remote environment where you don't have the natural turn around your chair and like asking somebody for help. And so this idea around like documentation of information and processes, I think, is really important. And that is a like a role actually in like engineering departments, like somebody who does documentation. And I think that is only going to be more important across like an organization to be able to spread knowledge and share. Because right now what happens in an organization is like you have people who've been there for a while and have all this tribal knowledge in their heads because they've like met the right people or like had the right conversations or been privy to hallway chit chat. And that's still kind of hard to pass on. And so this idea of like communication, I think, and writing is really important. And then as for one that's a little bit more like, I guess, like engineering-y focused or machine learning, is that there are automation opportunities, and a lot of machine learning requires you to have really good data, and there are increasingly like more groups and communities like focused on delivering that kind of data within an organization. So we saw like Mechanical Turk for Amazon, which is for like really simple data labeling, like is this a cat or a dog? But one thing we haven't seen is actually more complex things where you need subject matter expertise. And I think that is another area that will be really interesting in terms of like skills.
Okay. Sorry, I see here there's one question somebody's asking. What does it mean to be an investor in Bloomberg Beta? Maybe very briefly.
Sure. So Bloomberg Beta is a venture arm of Bloomberg L.P. It was founded about 8 years ago in the hopes that we could learn what we as an organization could learn from startups and how they operate and move quickly and disrupt certain businesses. And so we've been around investing in everything from automation companies, developer tools, and supply chain logistics, real estate. And so that is us in a nutshell.
Victoria, so we heard Min talking about, the opportunities. I think she sees it very much as a positive of the working from home. Bloomberg, I know, has a very strong office culture. And you're in charge of essentially to get us back into the offices, to find a way to get us back in the offices. But so are there any specific challenges with that, regionally possibly? If you could speak about sort of your work right now and what you're facing in terms of the challenge.
Sure, and thank you so much for having me. Thank you, Recoded, and everyone who put this together. I'm, as Min said, really excited to be here today. Yes, we are a global company. We have many offices around the world. I actually used one as my background today to kind of see what it's like, what we're missing out on right now. I think really with this issue, the most challenging thing is, the situation is so dynamic. We're used to dealing with global regulations and things that are in the typical course of running an operation, a global business. But we have case counts going up, they're going down, it's very dynamic. Governments are changing guidance very rapidly, whether it's a country or down to a state, to a city, to a county. These are all things that we're just staying very close on top of. And of course, our priority and our main concern is our employees' well-being and safety. So of course, that's what we take into consideration first and foremost. But yeah, there's a lot of moving parts and a lot of coordination around that.
I was saying that, as I mentioned earlier, the strong corporate culture that we have, which is very office focused, and to explain that a bit, that the idea is we have open plan offices, which probably is a question mark right now. We have spaces where people meet, are supposed to bump into each other, to exchange ideas, to talk to each other. Is that something that the company is looking at right now, on either to maintain or to find a new model where you get the best of both worlds, of the remote work and that wonderful culture that we did have of us all sharing an office, which, as we can tell from your background, are very lovely in general?
Right. I think, that is a key part of our culture at Bloomberg. It's, meeting someone in the pantry. You can see in this background, we have these fish tanks, we have art, we have spaces that are, designed for these interactions, whether you're, an engineer working on one floor, whether you're Mike Bloomberg, someone in financial products. We like this face-to-face innovation, collaborating, and that's part of our culture. But I will say that technology, since we are a financial technology company, has always been a part of our culture pre-pandemic. So, it wouldn't be unusual to come into an office space in New York and see someone, on a video conference with a colleague or a client in, London or Asia or anywhere across the world. We always had virtual events. We have messaging tools because community is very important to us across all of our offices. So I think, right now, yes, we are working from home for the most part, but we've kept that community through the technology and the tools that we use in our everyday business.
I'd like to bring in Alexandra. So we're hearing from Min that things are changing. There's in fact an acceleration in the change. It's not necessarily something new, but it's certainly upon us much more quickly than maybe people expected. How has this pandemic affected your organization, which is trying to bring people, to prepare people in the region for this new work environment?
Yeah, it's changed it in so many ways. I think very rapidly we realized we had to shift the whole educational model. So before the pandemic, we had a blended educational model. All of our content was online, but students were coming to class in physical spaces in the city that we worked a couple of times a week. And so we had to really think about how do you create a sense of community and connectivity amongst a cohort of students without being physically present in the classroom. And that was definitely something that we had to think through. I think it also really accelerated a lot of our thinking around scale. So I think the pandemic opens up a lot of opportunities to be able to make programs like ours more accessible. You know, if we're not necessarily required to have a physical presence, it means that we could open up programs to people where we didn't have an office location. And this has enabled us already to think about scaling up and making our programs more accessible, including, opening up in Lebanon in July. We don't have a physical presence there, but we know that what we do is really critical for a youth population that, is really in need of reskilling and access to digital employment opportunities. I think it's also made us think about what skills really are critical for, to prepare our students for the digital economy. So whilst we know that, technical skills are so critical for our students to learn, I think it's also made us reflect on what other skills are necessary to succeed in working remotely. And I think Min mentioned a couple of them. And I think what we do at Recoded is try and push youth to get them started on that path of learning how to learn, and we're that first step so that they can become these lifelong learners and keep teaching themselves throughout their lifetime and their careers. And I think also really focusing on some of those other skills that are critical, like being able to communicate well, collaborate well with others, to think critically and solve problems, which I think are so essential in this moment that we're living in. So there are some of the things that have really we've been thinking about, but also changes internally. And then I think, from a team perspective, it's also opened up a lot of questions around the way we operate. I think we had previously been pretty siloed in the 4 countries that we work in, and it's meant that we've had to collaborate a lot more across teams and restructure a lot of the teams and the way that we work. But I think ultimately that will be really beneficial for us as an organization as we look to making our programs more accessible at scale.
Have you already instituted some of those changes, or you're still in the mode of identifying the need, these soft skills, I think, that we're talking about, and then finding ways to communicate that?
Yeah, so soft skills has always been a huge part of what we teach, but I think we're redesigning the curriculum to be a little bit more focused on remote work. So we're going to be relaunching the soft skills content that we already teach, and also probably opening that up completely publicly to beyond, just the students going through our, immersive boot camps, because we know that, we don't want to limit that access to knowledge. We know that so many people could benefit from that. And, it's been challenging for us to find that sort of sense of curation of one course that really teaches you from, A to Z, all of the skills necessary to be able to work in the digital economy.
And we're talking about the MENA region. Are there any? I think I mentioned the education gap. Really, are there any specific challenges that you're facing in this region?
Yeah, there are so many. I think when we speak about digital inequality, it's hard to look past just the fact that not everybody has access to connectivity. Not everybody has access to a personal computer. I think at the moment, the Middle East, there only 50% is actually connected to the internet. And I think that, you know, is quite telling. It really dictates who has access to these amazing learning and employment opportunities. And I hope that that gap really decreases over the next couple of years. And then I think, you know, there is still, you know, as you mentioned, this huge knowledge divide. I think the formal education sector really does a disservice when it comes to skilling up and preparing youth for the labour market. And I think that's when, you know, we need more programs like Recoded, other organisations really filling that gap to make sure that youth are learning the skills that are necessary for, you know, the actual labour market, whether that's practical, technical skills, but also the soft skills that I mentioned.
So, I mean, you see the ability to work, you know, to do these virtual sessions as a way to expand maybe into areas where you weren't before, but isn't it also, you mentioned that only 50% of the region are online. By not being physically present, isn't the danger that you're basically going to be focused on the ones that are already having the advantages, whereas the ones that are cut off will remain cut off?
It's definitely a concern. At the moment, for all of our immersive programs, we offer a laptop loan program, and we also give connectivity data. So we give credit for people to be able to access mobile data so that they can connect to our online classes. But I think definitely it is a huge concern. And I think this is really where governments, private sector really needs to come in and think through how do we close that gap? And it isn't just the Middle East, it's worldwide. I think that digital divide exists everywhere, but it's obviously a lot more prevalent in this region because of, you know, just access to the resources to be able to provide that for people.
Min, let me get back to you. You know, how do you see the workplace evolving? I think you kind of alluded to it before. You know, do you see that, you know, what are the must needed skill sets and what's the new normal for the global economy? I mean, you know, which direction do you see it going?
So I feel in terms of like skills, I think that there is that general desire to like, well, actually, let me answer your first question in terms of like how the workplace will change. I think there was a question up in the chat, in the Zoom chat, about like, what are the different types of tools that people need? And I think it's a reflection of like the skills that are needed. So I'm going to answer it that way. And so the challenges of being in the workplace in this way are actually not that different, I think, from when we are co-located. Meaning when like you work in an office together, sharing ideas and brainstorming and those like idea generation skills of being able to think critically and ask good questions, like those are still really, really valuable. And they're just harder to do now because it is harder to like have serendipitous collaboration. And so I think like that skill of figuring out like how to connect the dots, of knowing like who are the right people that I should be bringing together, and what are the right tools, like what are the right pieces of software to enable those things. Those are two really good skills. And so I really encourage people to feel, I don't know, like I think businesses are feeling more open-minded about trying new tools right now, like whether it's like different types of video conferencing things or different types of productivity tools, and like learning how to use those really well, I think are actually really valuable because it is both a practical skill of knowing the tools and also the soft like communication skills and writing and knowing how to actually like teach people how to use them.
And do you see that change happening like in the short term, long term?
Oh, no, I think it's happening now.
Yes, So
Yeah.
in the next few months, I mean, are you seeing something that's a surprise coming up? You know, something we're not seeing. I know Zoom exploded. We're using Zoom.
Yeah.
Who heard of Zoom before? Zoom was a supermarket here around the corner, but
For sure. I mean, I
yeah.
think I don't know, Alexander, maybe you can also point to some of the things that you've taught or used, but like Slack is an ever present and I think ever growing piece of technology. And it is certainly really powerful when used well, and it can also be very overwhelming. And so knowing how to wield that power, I think, is important. On a related note, there's like Teams. I've seen a couple of new things around like decision-making tools on how to like better collaborate. And so whether that is project management tools like Asana, like knowledge management tools like a Notion or an Almanac, these are like smaller companies. Or even, I mean, within our portfolio, we have like a team success software called Range, and it is to help people do like remote stand-ups so that you can share your priorities and help unblock other people on your team.
Victoria, I mean, we're hearing about all these tools that have come up. I know we at Bloomberg, we have our own tools. Ours is called Nexi. We used it before this extensively, and it's really been you know, a lifesaver for us in this pandemic. But has this led to a sort of a more strategic reflection at Bloomberg on the future of work, or any sort of ethical challenges? And also sort of how do you feel it's impacted us humans, as it were? We were used to the office environment. Working from home does have its own challenges.
Sure, and I'll echo some of what Min said as well. You know, we do have proprietary technology at Bloomberg. We, you know, are using certain technologies prior to this pandemic, but it really has forced, I think, our engineering teams to, you know, maybe push, fast forward some projects that they were thinking about. You know, now that there is this need for our different teams to connect in this way, since we are working remotely. You know, different types of technologies work for different types of teams as well. You know, whether you're in sales, whether you're an engineer, different parts of the company. We have so many different, you know, role types too at Bloomberg. So yeah, I think we're definitely moving things forward, seeing what works. Also, you know, something of course that's extremely important to us because of who our clients are, security. You know, we have a very strong team who makes sure that anything we use is secure and, you know, we're not compromising any client data, anything like that. That's also very preeminent in the type of business that we're in as well as we evaluate technologies. But yes, we do miss our offices. We are working remotely. We are in this flexible period right now where I think, you know, we're using these tools, we're connecting, we're still getting the job done, being efficient, which is a wonderful thing. We're still actually, you know, back to the culture piece too of the company. And I would recommend anyone looking for a job to really find a company with a culture that you know, really resonates with you and aligns with your values. You know, we have a very strong philanthropy team. Service is very key to our culture too. And we've continued to connect teams also through service projects. Yes, they're virtual, so they look a little bit different than some of the things that we used to do. But I think all of those things are very key when also you're looking for a company. You know, our company cares about our employees so much. We reached out to every employee with this pandemic and said, do you need a mask? Does your family need a mask? We'll send them to you. You know, do you have the tools that you need at home to get your job done? You know, we're here as a partner, right, to provide that for you. So I think those are just some key things too in the job search.
I have another maybe couple of questions, and then we'll open it up to our audience to ask some questions. Min, what about the other side on the leadership? You know, on the tech leaders. What is their role in all of this? What should they be thinking about? What should they be doing to support these challenges? Not least also the challenges of working from home. I mean, it does have its downsides.
Totally. I think the idea of bring your whole self to work takes on a whole new meaning now that we're all working from home in this way. But as a leader, I think, oh, there's so much you can do. I think like modeling certain behavior, because in some ways, like we don't really know how we're supposed to work in this way. And I want to acknowledge that like working remotely, like there have been lots of default remote companies for several years now. Like GitLab is one technology company in the US that has been default remote for forever. Shopify is also another example of like a strong remote culture. But obviously like being default remote in a pre-COVID-19 world and a post-COVID-19 world, I think is quite different. And so I want to just say that distinction is there. But for leaders, I think modeling certain behavior about when you should be on and off, I think is very healthy, and being explicit about that in a way that you can kind of see in if you're co-located in an office when people are kind of like leaving to go spend time with their families or like have hobbies, personal life. So that's one, modeling like if you are in like a group team, communication channel, like, hey, like great day, like signing off now. Little things like that, I think play a big part. And then in terms of like leadership, being open to change, I think is like a big part of being able to adapt, and navigate like what is quite uncertain still, because to be honest, like we don't really know yet how long this will go. It could be 6 months, could be a year, could be forever, who knows, right? And so being open-minded about flexing to like the different demands of your workforce, and like what do your teams need to be able to like work sustainably for the next however long, I think is important. And so if that means being mindful of like, when are you sending emails? When are you asking people for things? Is it at 10 p.m. and you because like that might be the time that you are available, because you had childcare duties or something like that. I think right now for many employees and leaders, you're having to be worker, teammate, manager, parent, teacher, like all these things all at the same time. And that's a lot for any single person without the right community to support you. And so I would say being open-minded about like adapting to different needs and then modeling the behavior that you want to see in a remote world are things that leaders can be mindful of doing.
So my last question is to Alexandra. Which of these trends do you see as hopeful, and which give you cause for concern?
Absolutely. I'm a big optimist, so I choose to see all the good things that hopefully this pandemic will bring about. I think for MENA specifically, you have such a huge young population, and with that just comes so much untapped talent. And I think it's super exciting, I think, to see how youth are going to be able to shape this region going forward. It's clear that, the region will need to rapidly digitize sooner rather than later. And I think to be able to do this effectively, it all comes down to having the right human capital. So I think demand for skilled talent is definitely going to be on the rise, especially for youth that are able to blend, both technical skills with also the, those other critical skills, like being able to learn anything or to think critically is going to be absolutely more important than ever. And I think, one exciting thing is just the amount of information that is available today. I think we live at a time where information, access to it has been really democratized. And I think that's really exciting in terms of when we think about education and being able to skill yourself up over your career. I think it's really exciting to be able to have that access to information.
All right, I'll go over to some of the questions we have here from the audience. Ahmed Jamal has been active. I see he's got the golden. I think that's the Golden Gate Bridge behind you. So one question to Victoria is how has the software we've been using, I think in our case it's Nexi or any of the other software you mentioned, how has it made working from home as productive? Has it made it as productive as working in the office? Is there any measurement that Bloomberg has done in terms of the productivity and the efficiency?
Sure. I think our productivity has been the same. I think, we at I would say, the beginning of this pandemic, just the amount of client calls that we were getting. I mean, our, customer service reps were very overwhelmed with calls, but we're able to manage that because of, different technology that we were using. And also, and this is back to the culture piece. I know I keep bringing this up, but, it was so evident in the way that our different teams came together to support each other. So yes, technology is important. It's important to understand how to use technology. It's important to know how to use it before some, disaster or pandemic sort of situation. But we were quickly able to teach others as well throughout the company how to use certain technology. People pitched in, they all worked together, and I thought that was just really telling too about the type of company culture that we have.
And Alexandra, another question from Ahmed is your programs are in English. That's a limiting factor because, again, if those who speak English quite well tend to be already at an advantage, as it were. So do you have any plans to, to diversify the languages?
Yeah, absolutely. We did actually open up our first fully Arabic program as a pilot last year. And so that's really exciting. It was specifically targeted towards women, teaching them digital skills like graphic design and digital marketing. And that's something that we would love to scale up. And I think that, when it comes to a lot of the other content that we're developing, we're very cognizant of the fact that it needs to be both available in English and Arabic for the MENA region. And this has really just been a matter of capacity for us. So the content for our coding programs and our UX UI, like immersive bootcamp, the curriculum actually comes from a partner, Flatiron School, which is based in New York, and they certify the students going through our programs. And so we haven't, been developing that content, but when it comes to other content that we're developing in-house, we're definitely going to be doing a lot more translation going forward and making sure that it's accessible to a wider part of the population.
And do you help the trainees in job searches as well? Do you connect them with opportunities either in their own countries or abroad?
We do, yeah. So for anyone going through one of the immersive career focus programs that opts into our career services, we provide 6 months of post-graduation career services support. And that includes, anything from access to a full career prep curriculum where they, can get templates to refine their CV or LinkedIn profiles. We're linking people to mentors, and this is also something that we're going to be expanding through the partnership with Bloomberg. So we will be working with Bloomberg on a career mentorship program and a tech mentorship program with some of the engineers working at Bloomberg. And we also matchmake between prospective employers looking for talent, either locally or remotely, and our students. So this is something that we're really focused on. We have great career outcomes. So I think to date, nearly 90% of all of the job seekers going through a program at Recoded has found a job in the tech sector within 6 months of graduating from our programs.
Another quick question from Owen Shumba. It's about these partnerships. I mean, you've partnered with Bloomberg here. You know, do you have other partnerships with skills that are relevant to those companies? The skills that you are training, that you're giving your students?
Yeah, I think we're lucky to be living in a day and age where demand for both developers and product designers are on the increase. So we have a lot of you know, prospective employers that are always looking for skilled talent. And yeah, career services team is really focused on connecting, you know, students that are, you know, with the opportunities that they want, whether that is locally where they're located or remotely. But there are still often challenges to that. You know, we serve a lot of Syrians in Turkey, and access to work permits is still a challenge. And so that's when, you know, I get hopeful about the idea that remote work opportunities may also be on the rise, and that offers, you know, people who may be left out of the labor market, not because of their own talent, but because of systemic work restrictions, are able to access that high value employment. And I think that's really critical in the MENA region, where local opportunities are not always there. We don't have the, you know, really well-developed tech ecosystems that are, you know, more prevalent in the US and Europe. And so I think being able to connect people to remote work opportunities is something that is really exciting. And some of our students are already doing that, working remotely for companies in Canada or the US. And that's really awesome to see.
You know, maybe a question to the panel as a whole. Do you see the transition to digital economy as a way to even out imbalances? For example, to have young women in the Middle East, you know, get more job opportunities and you know, close the pay gap? I don't know if maybe Alexandra.
Yeah, I think this is super exciting. I think that's one thing that makes me hopeful. I think there is still in a lot of countries not enough labor participation from women, and we have a huge focus on this at Recoded. We're trying to have at least 40% women in all of the programs that we run, and some all female programs as well, to increase, you know, diversity in the tech sector, which is really critical. And I think that, you know, hopefully with this acceleration of workforces being distributed, it also opens up really interesting opportunities for women who may not necessarily be able to, you know, work outside of their homes, or need to work in more flexible ways. So I actually think this is an exciting opportunity for women as well.
The question of work culture has come up a couple of times. One, and you know, any advice, maybe Victoria, you may have in terms of creating kind of a more positive work culture than may be the case in some companies in the Middle East. What are the kind of things that, for example, talking about Bloomberg work culture, that has set us apart, and that maybe the employees themselves can do to help improve that culture? And same thing for the home work culture. What are the you know, what are the factors that are needed to make that strong and successful?
Sure. Well, I think it's, you know, incumbent on employers to managers to really, you know, stay in close communication with their teams, and, you know, really understand what they're working on, what they're going through, you know, understanding, you know, we, yes, look at government regulations and all of this return to office work, but there are so many other factors. There are parents who have children in school that, you know, would be an issue for them to go physically back into the office at this time, or living with family members who may be more at risk and things like that. So I really just think that, you know, staying in very close communication with your team, you know, really being cognizant of mental health. You know, Min made a really great point too of, you know, when we're in a physical office space, it's a little bit easier at the end of the day, you leave the office and sure, people can get in touch with you, but I think because we're all sort of in this situation together, we're all home, it becomes very easy to just constantly be on screens from meeting to meeting to meeting to meeting. And that's exhausting. And I think just employers really being cognizant of that, checking in with their teams, making sure that people have the help that they need is really key and should just be something that's always just a thought. And yeah, just to keep that in top of mind, I guess I'm trying to say, because it's easy to get caught up in the, you know, meeting, screen, meeting, and just really mental health is very important.
Min, a question to you. You know, when you're looking at companies to invest in, what are you looking for? We have somebody here who is thinking of starting a company, and what's your advice that you know he should focus on to make it an interesting company to invest in?
Oh gosh, I mean, first of all, I think it's awesome if you're thinking about it. I think now is a very interesting time for entrepreneurship in that there is so much knowledge out there about how to start companies. Like that is not specific to Silicon Valley anymore. I'll give a short answer because I want to be mindful of the time, but there is a lot about, so we invest in early stage companies in the future of work, and that can look like everything from knowledge work tools and productivity to machine learning companies. And there's a lot about how we think about founders at our website, bloombergbeta.com. And one of the core values, I think, of Bloomberg is transparency. And so we've tried to be equally transparent about what we look for, what we care about, how we work with founders, all on that.
I think we're done. I'll just, it's almost more of a comment here. Somebody says your boot camps are great, Alexandra, but you don't accept enough people. What can you do to fix it? And there are more people who want to join. Well done.
I agree, Ahmed. I agree. We cannot accept everybody that we would want, and it's definitely one of our goals as Recoded to be able to open them up to more people. And so hopefully in the next 12 months, we will be expanding the reach of our programs. I would love to be able to be training thousands and thousands of people every year, because I think, you know, as I said, the talent is really real, and there are so many people that deserve to be part of a community like Recoded, to have access to this knowledge and these skills. So it is definitely on our minds, thinking about how we can make them more accessible. I think at this point, our acceptance rate into our immersive programs is only around 6%. And so I would love to see that number really increase and the numbers of people going through our programs increase.
Is that a, sorry, I know time has run out, but I'm curious, is that by virtue of the skill set that you're getting in the applicants, or just capacity? You're just getting more applicants than you can take?
Yeah, just capacity at the moment.
Right.
We're trying to, I mean, obviously pre-COVID, we had been confined because of physical space. So every cohort that we were able to accept was around 20 students. And we take a pretty individual approach to every student that goes through the program, so that they, you know, feel like our instructors really care about them. We want to make sure that they're learning as much as they can. So it has been about capacity. I think as we shift online, the big question for us is, how do we scale our impact whilst keeping that quality really high, and that students in our programs still feel like they are cared for really deeply, which is one of our core values as an organization. So I think this is the big thing that our team is, the open question for our team at the moment. How do we increase the access to our programs and make sure that the most people possible can benefit from them?
All right, well, thank you very much. Thank you to all of you who attended, and to the panelists. I found it interesting. I hope you guys found it useful. You know, clearly things are changing fast, and technical skills are needed, but I found it also very interesting to hear that the soft skills, the presentation, the writing, expressing yourself, communicating, and keeping the community alive is also so important in this time, to create the kind of culture that Victoria was talking about, which, you know, makes an organization more effective, even when everybody's in a different place working from home. So thank you all for joining us. This is the first of four sessions that are being done on the digital trends, and on the opportunities for the youth in the Middle East. You can go to re-coded.com or directly to re-coded.com/Bloomberg-sessions to learn more about the other sessions. And if we may ask you to please fill out the short feedback survey, which Daria will be posting in the chat very shortly. So to allow us to learn the lessons from this first session and hopefully improve on the next time to make it more interesting for you. And with that, I hand over to Marcelo.
Thank you very much, Riyadh. Thank you for such a great moderation, and a big thanks to our panelists and each and every one of you for joining this event today. You have your reminder, please go and check our social media and our website to make sure that you know when the next session will be. In the meantime, please fill out the survey, and thank you again for joining, and we hope to see you next time.